In this video, I'll be describing how the classic Gary macro works. So for talents, you're gonna want to pick these talents. So Weapon Master, it's because when you do your Shadow Strike, you have a 15% chance to get a second Shadow Strike that will be both Shadow Blades empowered, Shadow Dance empowered, and Blood of the Enemy empowered. So it'll still do a ton of damage as that second one. For your 25 talent row, you want Night Stalker because that's a 12% DPS increase. You'll be in Shadow Dance. When you do this macro for row 3, you want Marked for Death because that way, if your Shadow Strike and Dressagath Trinket do not kill them, you can Mark for Death Eviscerate, which also does a lot of damage. On the next row, I picked Cheat Death. You can go with any of these, but I picked Cheat Death because that way it's easier for me, like in the 1v1 scenario, I can one-shot someone and then recover. For row 40, I used to run Prey on the Weak, but then I found out that this macro uses up 90 energy from a cheap shot and a shadowy duel, and then when I did the combo, I wouldn't have enough energy to get off an Eviscerate afterwards. So I run Shot in the Dark now to get that 4-second stun, so you're able to one-shot like those locks and people that have healing. For row 45, I use Dark Shadow because that increases the damage of your Dressagath Trinket and your Shadow Strike, so you can get up to like 7k Shadow Strikes with this. And for row 50, none of these really matter, but I just use Master Shadows because that's what you use for PvE. For PvP talents, you're going to want Dagger in the Dark. So your opening is you're going to want to run in, zap the target, and sit until you get 10 stacks, and then do the combo. Cold Blood is a very important part too because it does about 1 to 2,000 damage when you do your macro because it's off the GCD. And then Shadowy Duel is also very important because then the person cannot be targeted by their healer or other, DPS, whoever they're doing arenas with, so they're kind of just stuck by themselves. So now for essences, you're going to want to use Blood of the Enemy Major, and then the other minor powers, you're gonna want most likely Breath of the Dying, Crucible of Flame, and Condensed Light Force, or Breath of the Dying, Condensed Light Force, Purification Protocol, but I do not have those on Genkigari, so instead I just use these, because Conflict and Strife, if you're one-shotting someone, those stacks won't really add up and become useful, and then obviously a haste proc isn't really gonna do much at stacks. So yeah, if you have everything, you'd want to use Blood of the Enemy Major, Breath of the Dying Minor, Condensed Life Force Minor for the, it's a damage proc and also increases your damage done to the target, and then either Crucible of Flame or Purification Protocol. Just anything that can proc and do just flat damage would be very good. So I'll now explain how the macros work, how the classic Gary macro does so much damage. So the first macro we're using is this one. I have it on Control 1, because that's where I have Cheap Shot, and this is what that does. The Schmacro. So, the first thing it does is cast Cheap Shot, which is on the GCD, but that doesn't matter because it's the first thing you're casting. So now the target is stunned for 4 seconds. So classes like Warlock or Monk that have defensives and healing but can't be used while stunned are now, not as powerful because they can't just immunity or heal out of this, or like Mortal Coil me. Then I will slash cast Shadowy Duel, which puts the target in a Shadowy Duel so they cannot be targeted by their healer or whoever they're with in the arena. So it's just me and the stunned target, so I can burst them. And then I also am able to use stealth abilities for 6 seconds while I'm in it. And then it also casts Shadow Blades, which will increase my damage with the Shadow Strike by 50%, which is huge. And also casts Cold Blood, which will do a good chunk of damage that will also scale with the empowerment of Shadow Strike, which is why you want it to go off after the cheap shot, because it will also proc off the cheap shot. And then after you use that on the target, you want to use Blood of the Enemy, which is another GCD, gaining 25% crit. And for me, that put me up to 56, and also increasing the damage deal from crits by 25, which is really big, because then the next macro, Slash cast Symbols of Death, which will increase your damage done by 15%, and also make your Shadow Strike always crit, because see that your next combo point generator will always crit. Then after that, you'll use Shadow Dance, which will actually, so you'll be able to use Shadow Strike, even though you already would be, because you're in a shadowy duel, and it'll also increase that damage by 30% due to Dark Shadow, so you'll be doing 50% plus 30% plus a Cold Blood, an Empowerment, and you know, that's a ton of damage. Then you also cast Blood Fury. I do that because I'm an orc. This is also off the GCD. The only spell in this macro is Shadow Strike, so that way it, you know, increases my damage by a little bit. It's not that mandatory, you know, it's just 42 attack power, not that much. And then after that, I have Slash cast Cold Blood. That is needed, I just forgot to take it out of this macro. So, it won't deactivate the Cold Blood. It's just for some reason in case it wouldn't go off, which it does with this macro. It makes sure to go off. And then you do a Shadow Strike, which would be a 15% damage increase. Always crit. Have 25% crit damage increased. Have 30% damage increased. And have 50% damage increase. And then, I'll have Slash use 14. So I have Drestagath Trinket in slot 14. So when I press that, you know, it uses Drestagath, also all those off GCD things. I did not use Shadow Dance because I was stealthed. Can't use Shadow Dance while stealthed. But in this, I won't be stealthed, but I'll still have access to stealth-based abilities, but that doesn't matter. And then, the final macro, if they're not dead, is just a simple cast Marked for Death, and then Slash cast Eviscerate to do a 5 combo point Eviscerate. But if you have Azerite, if you have 2 of the, this Azerite trait, the First Dance, or at least just 1, it won't matter, because with this you'll already be at least 4 combo points. So what you could do is you could use Eviscerate, then the Mark, so that way you're getting 2 high power Eviscerates, but they'll probably just be dead from the first one. And then after that, if they're still not dead, like if they got off a health stone or something, you can just spam Shadow Strike and Eviscerate. You'll still be doing a ton of damage, because you'll have Symbols of Death up, Blood Fury up, Shadow Blades up, and the buff from Dark Shadow, so they'll just be dead still. And you have 6 seconds to do all that damage, and that's only 2 globals really that you're doing damage, and then for those seconds, they're stunned. So I'll be commentating this match and show off, you know, how this macro kind of works in Arena. So for this match, because there's a Protection Paladin and Affliction Warlock, I'm gonna need to kill the Warlock during Shadowy Duel, just because of all the immunities Protection Paladin can give. For this match, I'll be using Instant Poison. I could use Wound Poison against locks, usually if I want, to make their Health Stone not as effective, but because of immunities the Protection Paladin would give if I can't kill them in the duel, and like in their cheap shot, it won't matter. And then just a refresher on the talents. And so we're gonna start off and sprint in, zap the lock. Banish that. And then Ooh, let's go. Look at that. Look at that. A 9,000 damage Shadow Strike. It's insane how much you can buff a Shadow Strike's damage. Oh, looks like this guy messed up his macro. Immune, I'm just gonna run away for a re-stealth. Gonna let my hunter get off him with the blind. Oh, broke the blind immediately. Gonna pop Shadow Strike, so I'll do a bunch of damage because of the Dark Shadow talent. Gonna stun him, so he has to either bubble here or die. Okay, he bopped. Sprint away for a re-stealth.